Thank you very much for joining me here today about a decision that is impacting Canada's food security and our production for years to come. I am proud to be standing alongside many of my Conservative colleagues here with you today, as well as Jeff Reid from CCAN, Karen Murchison and Andre Uhl from the Organic Growers, Jason Schneider from the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, Phil Mount from the National Farmers Union, Milton Dick from the Agriculture Union, part of PSAC, Michael Schieffel of the Canadian Seed Growers Association, and Kathy Jo Noble from the National Cattle Feeders Association. Over the last several weeks, the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food heard from researchers, industry leaders, community representatives, provincial governments, all delivering the same message. These closures of these research centres and experimental farms will cause long-term, irreversible damage to Canada's agriculture research capacity, food security, and food production. In fact, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture submitted a letter to the Minister of Agriculture, signed by 26 different agriculture groups representing tens of thousands of farmers right across this country. And witnesses were clear. Every dollar invested in agricultural research returns exponentially more in economic development. The expertise, the regional data, and breeding programs housed in these stations cannot be transferred or recreated. Universities, provincial governments, and the private sector said they simply don't have the resources to take this research on. Plus, the evidence underscored each facility is in a unique region for a specific reason, and they're irreplaceable. Conducting these research is tied specifically to the soils, the climates, and the conditions of each region. Critical programs like soil health, forage crops, cattle research, food safety, organics, and seed development stand to be lost permanently. This decision undermines Canada's food security. And as a result, the Agriculture Committee submitted and completed a report that represented about 20 recommendations, 2 of which were to maintain Canada's only organic research centre in Swift Current and maintain the 7 research centres. And this report and those recommendations was supported by every political party in this House, including the Liberal members. This comes at a time when the Liberal government is demonstrating misplaced priorities overall. Last year alone, they spent $19 billion on consultants, $33 million on a prison farm, $200 million on a gravel pad spaceport, and $300 million on a failed health prescription program. The Liberal government will tell you that these cuts are going to save about $230 million over the next decade. But what they are not telling you is this also includes cuts to important scientific research, the loss of world-class scientists and researchers, most of which cannot be replicated anywhere else in Canada. This is not a budget decision. This is a values decision. And the evidence suggests that this decision is wrong. Just recently, the Prime Minister warned that a country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. And I agree. But at the same time, this Liberal government is dismantling the very foundations of Canadian agriculture and food production. This highlights the disconnect between Liberal rhetoric and reality. Conservatives are calling on the Liberal Agriculture Minister to maintain the organics program in Swift Current, halt these closures of the provinces, and work with the provinces and stakeholders and the scientists and the employees on a path forward that does not jeopardize the future of agricultural science and research in Canada. Thank you very much. I would like to now invite my colleague Jacques Gourde, the Associate Shadow Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Merci John. Bonjour à vous tous et toutes. Merci beaucoup de nous avoir rejoints aujourd'hui. Comme vous le savez, l'agriculture me tient à cœur. Ça a toujours été mon cheval de bataille en tant qu'agriculteur et surtout comme le seul député québécois agriculteur à l'heure actuelle à la Chambre des communes. Bien que l'agriculture soit l'affaire de tous, je crois qu'on aperçoit les choses de manière différente. Lorsqu'on travaille la terre de ses mains, lorsqu'on sème ses propres plantes fourragères, qu'on les récolte et qu'ensuite qu'on les donne à ses animaux qu'on voit grandir. Au-delà de ce travail très concret, il ne faut jamais oublier le travail en amont et les agriculteurs en sont très conscients. Quand on voit nos semences changer plus de rendement, quand on voit nos pratiques que des avancements génétiques dans les espèces animales arrivent, on sait que derrière ce succès, il y a de la recherche scientifique et c'est la recherche d'aujourd'hui qui fait la réussite de demain. Malheureusement, les libéraux ont décidé d'aller de l'avant avec la décision de fermer 7 centres de recherche et de développement dans des sites de fermes expérimentales, dont le Centre de recherche agroalimentaire de Sainte-Foy. Et il y a aussi des coupes importantes à la ferme expérimentale de Saint-Augustin-des-Maures. Cette décision non réfléchie est complètement déconnectée de la réalité du terrain et met en péril des connaissances essentielles à la préservation de notre souveraineté alimentaire au Canada. La perte de cette expertise est irréversible et entraînera des dommages à long terme. Et il est clair que le gouvernement doit s'en tenir à une rigueur budgétaire, mais quand on connaît le gaspillage de ce gouvernement libéral, qui a dépensé plus de 19 milliards de dollars en consultation l'année dernière, qui a gaspillé 200 millions de dollars sur un port spatial en gravier, 300 millions de dollars de plus sur un programme de technologie de santé raté et qui s'apprête à dépenser 100 milliards de dollars sur un TGV que personne ne veut et qui va couper nos terres en deux, les libéraux auraient pu se garder une petite gêne. Il est clair que ce n'est pas une décision budgétaire, c'est une décision idéologique. Nous revenons du comité parlementaire de l'agriculture et de l'agroalimentaire où nous avons entendu des chercheurs, des leaders de l'industrie, des représentants communautaires et des gouvernements provinciaux. Il y avait un consensus et tous délivraient le même message urgent. Il faut renverser la décision des fermetures. Les témoins ont réaffirmé que chaque dollar investi dans la recherche agricole en rapporte davantage et que l'expertise, les données régionales et les programmes de sélection hébergés dans ces stations ne peuvent être transférés ou recréés. Il n'est pas trop tard pour que les libéraux changent de cap devant cette idée qui semble tout droit sortir des ministères, qui coupe sans tenir compte des conséquences à long terme. Le non-renversement de cette décision serait une occasion ratée du ministre de l'Agriculture de faire valoir son leadership. Avec mes collègues aujourd'hui, je m'adresse au gouvernement. Il n'est pas trop tard pour prendre la bonne décision. Merci. Maintenant, je laisse la parole à M. Jeff Reed.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Jeff Reed, General Manager of CCAN, and we represent about 600 independent seed companies spread across Canada. And those are companies, small independent businesses that are embedded in our rural economic communities right across the country. And they play a direct role in turning the products of plant breeding innovation into the value that our farmers and agribusinesses depend on. We're deeply concerned about the decision by AAFC to close a number of these research stations without making any sort of meaningful consultation with industry or the sort of economic and risk assessment that a decision of that magnitude demands. It seems ironic to us, I guess, at a time when government is talking about nation building, that these closures move in exactly the opposite direction. These stations are critical public assets that support both public and private breeding companies. They provide the research capacity, field trialing, disease screening, and regional specific data that public and private breeding companies depend on. Without those, progress slows, innovation is delayed, and Canada's ability to remain competitive is put at risk. Agricultural research, and specifically plant breeding, is one of the best return on investments that Canadians can make. It's been shown to deliver a 32-to-1 return on investment to both farmers and consumers. Our member companies alone have invested over $1.7 billion in infrastructure in their own seed processing facilities. And those are small, independent, family-owned companies across Canada. So they're rooted in the output of these stations, and those figures pale in comparison to the broader value at stake for farmers and food processors, exporters, and the rural community overall. So our message is simple. If government is serious about building this nation, we must protect the research infrastructure that helps to feed it, grow it, and keep it competitive. We're calling on the government to reverse these announced closures, conduct proper consultations, and complete a risk assessment and an economic assessment, and work with us as industry players to maintain that capacity that really underpins our competitiveness in the agriculture and food chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for all for being here. My name is Karen Murchison, and I'm the Executive Director at Canadian Organic Growers. Joining me today is Andre Uhl, one of nearly 7,000 organic farmers across the country who are directly impacted by the planned closure of the Organic and Regenerative Research Program at AAFC's Swift Current Research and Development Centre. I want to also begin by offering thanks to MP John Barlow for his leadership on this file. His continued attention to the planned closure of this program and the research centre closures across the country has helped ensure that the concerns of farmers are being heard. Canadian Organic Growers is one of many farm, food, and research organizations deeply concerned about these decisions. The Organic and Regenerative Program represents nearly 2 decades of dedicated organic systems research. It includes long-term organically managed trial land, active research projects, scientific expertise, and data sets that cannot be easily recreated once they are lost. And perhaps most importantly, and certainly most uniquely, this program is slated for closure at a facility that is not itself being closed, raising serious questions about the rationale for eliminating this unique research capacity. Our immediate concern is timing. Spring field operations are underway, and if trial land is altered, destroyed, or taken out of organic management before this decision is reconsidered, the damage could be irreversible. Canada cannot compromise the integrity of a long-term field trial and expect to simply restart it later. The research done at Swift Current matters to organic farmers and ranchers, but it also matters well beyond the organic sector. It supports practical knowledge on soil health, crop rotations, weed and pest management, disease suppression, low input production, climate adaptation, and resilience. These are priorities for farmers across all production types and crop types. This research is also needed to help Canadian farmers meet growing demand for organic products, demand that today is too often met by imports. Without strong domestic research capacity, we risk ceding to foreign producers major economic opportunities that Canadian farmers, processors, and rural communities should be supported to capture here at home. Notably, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food recommended that the government reconsider its decision to cancel this program. That parliamentary process should not be preempted by operational decisions that permanently eliminate the very research assets under discussion. So our message today is straightforward. Pause any actions that would compromise the long-term organic trial land, allow the planned 2026 field operations to proceed, maintain the scientific and technical capacity needed to preserve program continuity, and most importantly, engage urgently with stakeholders affected by the planned closure of this program and the research stations. This is about protecting public science, producer-focused innovation in a growing sector, and Canada's capacity to support resilient agriculture for the long term. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Schneider. I am a fourth-generation grain farmer from Vulcan County. I also have the privilege of serving as the Vice President of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. I'm here today for the thousands of producers and rural communities who are deeply concerned about the future of agriculture research. Recently, the Standing Committee on Agriculture released a report on the closure of research centres. Their findings were unanimous. They have called on the minister to immediately reverse the decision to close 7 research sites across this country. In Alberta, this decision threatens the Lacombe Research and Development Centre. Lacombe is not just another government building, it has been the backbone of Western Canadian agriculture for 119 years. It houses Canada's only national meat science program and our only federal cow-calf research centre. As a farmer, I know you cannot simply pack up a century of research and move it to another province. The work in Lacombe is tied to our specific soil and our unique climate in the Parkland region. When you shut down these research plots, you throw away over 100 years of irreplaceable data. This is a library of agriculture knowledge that belongs to the farmers and ranchers of Alberta, and it is being permanently deleted. The impacts of this closure are immediate. We are talking about the loss of over 100 highly skilled jobs in the Lacombe community. These are our neighbours and our families. Beyond the local impact, every dollar invested in research pays for itself many times over through productivity and innovation. Canadian agriculture is the envy of the world, and high-quality agriculture research is a big reason why. It drives innovation, strengthens productivity, and helps our producers compete in an increasingly challenging global market. Cutting these programs is not about finding efficiencies, but it weakens our competitive edge that Canada has worked generations to build. Recommendation 19 of the committee report calls for a pause and real consultation with the people who actually have boots on the ground. Listen to the committee and the producers who feed this country. Do not trade a century of progress for a short-term budget cycle. Once this expertise and this land is gone, they are gone for good. Please follow the committee's advice, reverse this decision, and keep Lacombe open. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Phil Mount. My wife and I farm in the south end of the city of Ottawa, but I'm here today as the Vice President for Policy of the National Farmers Union. I'd like to start by thanking the honourable members and all the members of the Standing Committee on Agriculture for taking the time to carefully look at the evidence, weigh the full value of the long-term benefits and consistent return on investment of the agricultural research and plant breeding at these research farms against the relatively minor short-term savings from cuts, and drawing the clear conclusion that we need to reverse the short-sighted decision to cut agricultural research centres and experimental farm sites. These cuts would throw away decades of public investment in people, science and infrastructure, while increasing long-term risks to farmers and the food system. As John knows from his visit to our town hall, agriculture groups from across the country came together in opposition, and we heard how the cuts at these farms will impact a diversity of agricultural research on forages and sustainable livestock production, crop rotation, soil health, organic and regenerative agriculture, long-term organically managed field trials, and regionally adapted systems research are national scientific assets that cannot be recreated once lost. This is the long-term scientific expertise that we need to solve complex challenges to protect our national security by giving the farmers of today and tomorrow in all regions and all sectors the tools to manage production challenges. Public plant breeding focuses on addressing real-life issues farmers face in regions across this country. Every year in different regions, we're seeing new pathogens, new insects, changing weather patterns coming into play, with impacts from soil degradation to crop failure. We need more public research, more than ever, to deal with these new challenges and support our strategic sector. Finally, I have to address the false economy of these proposed cuts. The committee's report reveals that the cost savings for not running these 7 facilities is just over $23 million a year, and that doesn't account for the costs that would flow from closing them or the losses from not doing the research into the future. In public plant breeding, we regularly see returns of over $30 for every dollar of investment. At the National Farmers Union, we fully support the committee's recommendation that the government provide a full cost-benefit analysis for each facility. The costs of closing them undoubtedly exceed the annual short-term savings. And to put our priorities into perspective, as much as I'll enjoy football's World Cup, since the Parliamentary Budget Officer reported that the federal government will spend $473 million to support 13 games in Toronto and Vancouver, I know I'll be watching those games thinking that same amount of money would keep the 7 research facilities and experimental farms open for 20 years.
Hello there. I'm Milton Dick. I am the president of the Agriculture Union, representing many of the members with Ag Canada who are losing their positions with the cuts to the research centres. I just want to say, you know, we're speaking about the parliamentary report on science and in research in Canada, and it was very wonderful to see how many people came out to represent and to ask for the research stations to be brought back and not to be closed. The amount of witnesses saying the value to agriculture was tremendous. I'm originally from Swift Current, Saskatchewan, and grew up in a farming community, so I know the value of agriculture. These cuts, I think, damage the basis for conducting agriculture research in Canada. Whether, you know, it's the loss of centres that have certain climate or soil needs, or with the loss of programs such as the organic program that are very specific. The loss of the food safety program in Guelph, very specific. We're losing programs and we're also losing the footprint. The premise of these cuts was based on that the Canadian civil service had grown by 30-some% in the last few years. In 2012, it was 278,000. 2024, it was 367,000. For Ag Canada, at the same time, it was 6,600 in 2012, and it's today 5,800. So when you're cutting 15% out of a group that's already been cut, rather than the philosophical everybody's grazed by 30%, you're cutting something that's far, far deeper. In the report, it states that Heath MacDonald was quoted as saying that research and development has declined by 15% by the public spending. Private sector funding to universities is down by 77%. Employers conducting research, new companies, is down by 30%. The answer is not to cut our public service funding. The value of research is well known. It's already been stated here by several, but a lot of research is not noted for money. It's not something that can be done quickly. It's not something that can be done that will gain you immediate monetary benefits. Those kind of research projects are the long-term projects that are based on research centres, whether it's forage, whether it's cereals, breeding. All these testing sites are something that we need to keep and we need to maintain. A lot of the cuts, with these cuts, the cuts to something like food safety for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which is also cutting, those cuts will harm us possibly with safety in our food processes right now. But when you cut research, you harm our agriculture and you harm our food safety for tomorrow. So these cuts are very, very detrimental. We will never be able to rebuild these research centres again once they're gone. It is something that we very much oppose, and we very much wish to say we'd like them to be re-engaged and to be rebuilt and to be kept. The first committee report, or the first recommendation of the committee, was that the CFIA Longueuil lab would not be shut down. Those members of mine have gone to opting. They have had their opting letters taken back, and the lab is now going to be up for several years. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you on behalf of my members and for all of the great and hard work they do. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for our stakeholders who came, in many cases, from a long distance to talk about how important this message is to retain these 7 research centres and experimental farms and the organics program at Swift Current. This is a values decision by this government, not a budget decision, that will have a devastating impact on food security, food safety, and certainly food affordability moving forward. I'm welcome to take your questions.
I'm wondering if you've heard about any conversations between the federal government and provinces about a potential new model for these experimental farms and research centres to take, and if so, what do you think of that idea?
Well, I think from the testimony that we had at committee and our discussions with provincial leaders, municipal leaders, this was clearly a move by the Liberal government saying we're going to cut this research and we expect the universities, the provinces and the private sector to pick it up. Every single witness we had at committee saying they will not do this. They don't have the funding to do it, the resources to do it, or the capacity to do it. Plus, they don't have that generational knowledge, as some of my stakeholders said, that library of knowledge and information that's there. You can't just pick this up and move it somewhere else. These facilities are put in these regions for a very specific reason, whether that's climate, soil, weather. You can't just pick this up and move Lacombe to Lethbridge, for example. So I think the Liberal government was certainly hoping that somebody would pick this up and take it on. But why wasn't that discussion happen before you made these announcements and these closures? And then you would certainly have gotten that message that that is not a pathway that's going to work. We need to keep these open. And what we're asking the government to do is we're trying to give them an off-ramp. We will help you find funding in other programs that producers don't see as beneficial, but they certainly see this as a top priority.
And I guess just why, you've already touched on this a bit, but why in your view is it important or necessary that the federal government be responsible for this?
Well, this is a program that the federal government built. These were programs that have been built literally over decades. In some cases, like Indian Head, over 100 years, Lacombe. And I think the other aspect that we have to remember here is the success that these programs have had. Minimal and zero till was developed in Indian Head. Canola was developed over 20 years, now one of the most profitable and most important crops for a Canadian producer. 80% of the wheat varieties being planted right now across Canada are varieties that are developed by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. That shows the success of these programs that were built by the federal government in partnership with stakeholders. And now the federal government is just turning its back on generational innovation and research that every single stakeholder has said will be irreplaceable. Once we lose these farms, you can't get them back.
Just a question on beef. All 4 Mercosur countries are vying for more beef or an increased beef tariff-free or reduced tariff quota to export into Canada's market. What do you have to say about that, especially as negotiations are looking like they may or may not conclude end of this year?
I think the concerns are very real from the beef, pork, and poultry industries, is that you are going to be opening our borders to products that don't meet our standards in terms of animal husbandry, traceability, animal health. We have to be very cognizant of the concerns with African swine fever, foot and mouth disease, BSE. These would put our food security in jeopardy. But I think it's also important to realize that there has to be reciprocal trade. As a conservative, I'm always supportive of free trade, but I want reciprocal trade. Argentina and Brazil, for example, bring in 1% of imported beef. In Canada, we bring in 30%. 30% of the beef consumed in Canada is already imported. We have done our part. So I don't believe that you're signing a free trade agreement with partners who are going to be reciprocal. I think the focus of this Liberal government should be not plowing ahead with a new free trade agreement that is going to put pillars of our economy at risk, but look at trade agreements that already are in place, like the United Kingdom and the European Free Trade Agreement, Canada-CETA, and why are we not getting access in those agreements that are already in place? Start fixing those non-tariff trade barriers before you start looking at other markets.
What would you negotiate for in terms of achieving reciprocity? Because, of course, this could be a delayed deal if it's all secured before the fall. Election happened in Brazil, and that could change things dynamically for time-wise. So what would you be looking for in terms of from the other side?
Well, I want to see reciprocity, and I don't understand why this Liberal government is pushing this trade agreement so quickly and so hard when we haven't had a single industry in Canada that's saying we need this agreement. Take your time, make sure you get it right. I'd rather have a deal that works for Canadian industries than just have a deal that the media is going to applaud you for signing a trade agreement. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate everybody's interest.